Again, Justin's been here a couple of times, so thank you for coming back, Justin. We've had a couple of different formats. Justin ran a panel. I facilitated a panel as the second time he joined us at Clubby, and then now today wanted to create something maybe a little bit more informal, a little bit more like a conversation. So we've worked together to put together a bunch of questions. We'll go through that today, and then leave a little bit of time for people who would like to offer up some questions as well. Before we get started, Justin is the founder and CEO of Lab 651, Recursive, Awesome, and Applied AI. He's a leader in the mobile, web, and artificial intelligence world. He's got a variety of tech offerings. And if you go to his LinkedIn bio, there's like 25 different things that he's doing. So I think he's one of the few guys who juggle more businesses than I do. So Justin, tell us a little bit more about the various activities that you're up to.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rick. And you thank me for being here today, but I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day for attending this event. So if we haven't met before, I'm Justin. I am a very curious person, I guess. When you mentioned there's 24 different things, I'm always interested in what's new. And whether it be mobile application development, whether it be Internet of Things, I did a lot of work in that space. And then now, of course, artificial intelligence. I'm always sort of like, in some ways, maybe too far ahead of the curve. But very, very interested in learning new things and then also bringing people together through our communities. And so that's what Applied AI does. We do conferences, meetups. I have a podcast on artificial intelligence, and I wanted to make sure that if people get a chance to grab one of these, please do. I'm going to be citing, at least taking a look at, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So there's a picture there at the bottom, and I think we'll be talking a little bit about artificial intelligence, but yeah. So that's a little bit background about me. I'm kind of sort of always interested in technology and a curious learner.
All right, so they got the handouts there on the table. Feel free to take some. If we run out and you want one, let us know. We'll get you that. Justin, when we interacted, before we get to our questions, you had said there were two really good books that you liked as kind of primers and background for the AI topic. Co-Intelligence and Nexus were these two books. So maybe tell everybody about that.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time reading and a lot of time thinking about artificial intelligence, and I think these two books sum it up pretty well. They're quite different. One is called Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. If anybody hasn't had a chance to read that, he talks about the jagged frontier of AI. There are a lot of things in artificial intelligence that are really good, and then as you start experimenting around with it, you'll find things that it's really bad at, right? But he comes up with these 4 laws of AI. First one that he says is always invite AI to the table. And it's going to be a common theme that I'm going to try and maybe emphasize here today is that we should always be thinking about how we can bring artificial intelligence into whatever task we're doing. And there are a lot of people that are used to just going to Google and using Google for their answers, or used to going to the library. There's people that have their ways that they would always do it. But he talks a lot about making sure that at least you consider bringing AI to the table. The second things he talks about is making sure that you always involve a human in the loop, right? And so you will find that AI doesn't give you answers good all the time, and that at the end of the day, it's your work, it's your it's your reputation, right, that's on the line. And so you can use AI, but it should be used collaboratively, right? That's where AI systems work really well, is collaboratively with humans. They're not taking over and giving answers all the time. The third thing that he discusses in the book is treat AI like a person, but tell it who you want to have it be. And this gets into how you interact with it. You can use ChatGPT and say, act as a caring manager of my team. Or you can say, act as a strategic consultant from Anderson Consulting Group, right? You're going to get different responses the way that you prompt the AI through these things. And these all comes through experimentation, but you got to be pretty clear on the type of AI you want to work with. And then the fourth one is basically, this is the worst AI you'll ever use, right? This is going to get better, right? And that can be scary, but really the concept around that is understanding that this is an ongoing journey. It isn't a one-time thing. As you're bringing AI into your businesses, this isn't a little project. I've seen businesses say, we're going to do a little AI thing over here. No, this is transformative. There's lots of areas that it can be used. And so just understand that it's going to get better and be able to, grow over time. The second book, I won't take as much time, but it's a book called Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote a really interesting book called Sapiens, but this book, Nexus, just came out a couple months ago, and he talks about information networks, all the way from the Stone Age to where we're at today. And he paints an interesting picture of how artificial intelligence and these information networks are already talking to each other, the way you have machines to communicate with other machines, and the way humans communicate. And a lot of times, we're starting to rely on these networks to give us all of our information. And there's some cautionary things that I hadn't thought about that he brings up in this book that I think are really good. So those are two sort of interesting views on AI that I would highly recommend.
Great. Well, again, thank you for sharing those. One of the things I like about Justin, he's very practical and pragmatic in solving problems. And while he's a tech guy, doesn't get bogged down in the tech. ChatGPT is many times listed as the killer app, but you always say you don't have to have latest and greatest. You just mentioned right there, AI is going to get better over time. But how do companies decide what tools are right for them at this time?
It's a good question. I think, a lot of new technology comes into place and people want to just throw it at everything. They want to use it everywhere. And one of the things that I will want to level set in this little picture that we have here is AI is actually a blanket term, right? It's a portfolio of different technologies that we've been seeing advance over time. It's not like ChatGPT came out in 2022 and it was like, we hadn't seen this before. Most of the population hadn't seen it before, but believe me, we have been advancing slowly but surely through various phases of artificial intelligence. In fact, AI was, if you didn't know this, was coined, the term was coined at Dartmouth College in 1954 by John McCarthy. And we've gone through these series of advancements, right? And AI is really, what this thing shows here, is really the idea of having computers do things in an intelligent way, right? Basically be able to do what humans could do. Inside of that, we have this idea called machine learning, which has actually been around for more than 20 years. The concept is software engineers like myself, I'd have to write a bunch of code to basically have the machines do interesting things. Machine learning flipped that on its head. We give it a bunch of data, and now it can connect all the pieces and start doing a lot of analysis and prediction. Prediction's a key word in a lot of these. All of this AI stuff is actually predicting what's going to happen next, what the outcome should be, right? What is the sales report going to be next month? That is AI. That's something we've been doing for a long time. Credit card processing, that's AI. It's machine learning, but it's still under this AI umbrella. We've seen deep learning now. These neural networks now have allowed us to get smarter and smarter intelligence. And then boom, Gen AI, right? That's the key thing that happened, is we actually now have enough information that we can start having generative AI be able to start generate content and generate answers and responses for us, right? And so businesses oftentimes want to just jump right on Gen AI. They basically say, I need to have a chatbot to do this, right? And I've worked with many companies where I've said, wait, hold on. Like, are there other traditional approaches that we can still use? Because a lot of this technology has been out for 20, 30 years, right? Are there other traditional approaches that we should use? Because Gen AI is rife with hallucinations, right? There are oftentimes things that we don't actually want to have that come out of this, right? So do you need to have the latest and greatest tools, or what should you be looking at? I mean, I think number one is don't jump to the conclusion that I need to have a chatbot for everything, or I need to make sure that I'm going to use generative AI for all of my work. What I typically do is what's the business problem, right? What efficiency and automation can you bring out of your business? What are things that humans are doing a lot of work on, right? What are things that they don't want to do, right? Let's start focusing on specific areas. And then, where do you have data where you could potentially train a system to do it? Or, again, have that human in the loop to be able to sort of help the AI enhance what they do in their job today. So ChatGPT was really interesting in that it gave us a box. It gave all of us a box to start typing stuff in. But the paradigm of what's happening underneath the covers is a lot different than a Google search. And so having people understand how it works is still something that I'm kind of helping businesses educate them on today.
So you're big into learning and growing, whether it's teaching at St. Thomas or you started the applied AI community here in the Twin Cities. What advice do you have for people who want to learn more about AI but don't really know where to begin? And again, this is a little bit more of a business community versus a technical community. So where do people start when they want to learn more?
Well, number one, I think, is coming to events like this, obviously. And there's a lot of other people, I think, that I've talked to today that are using AI in the creative fields, for example, right? So you are amongst people that have dabbled in a lot of the space, and I'm all about community. I'm all about getting people out to talk because I'm not going to have all the answers. And so something like the Applied AI group, which if you scan the QR code there, you can be directed to a group that meets every month, and we do conferences. We just had a big conference on November 15th. Get out and interact with people that are sort of leaders in this space. And we have a growing community, 5,000 people, more than 5,000 people now here in the Twin Cities that are working on this. So reach out and connect with people. I would also highly encourage you to read, right? That's the things that I've been reading on for the past 5-6 years now on this whole Gen AI space. Has just been fascinating. So a lot of people can be self-learners in a lot of these aspects. And then also, the thing I would say is, I'll keep coming back to this, is just experimentation, right? If you want to get healthier, you eat an apple a day. You don't eat 7 apples at the end of the week, right? So the concept is as you're working, have a tab up that basically has some type of a generative AI. And the other thing I would say is ChatGPT is fine. There are other tools like Claude is one that is actually very, very good as well. There is another one called Perplexity. And again, I have a whole list of resources and tools that you can start using, but I highly encourage you to start experimenting around with it and seeing what it can do. And oftentimes when I sit down at my desk, I'm like, what's a task that I think I'm taking a lot of time on that I think generative AI could help me with? So case in point, we ran this conference, and we got like 80 submissions of people that wanted to speak at our conference on artificial intelligence. I had this huge spreadsheet with all the descriptions of people that were there. Well, I said, I don't want to have 3 presentations on how AI is related to medical, or 4 that's how related to finance, right? AI is such a broad-based thing. So I put it into ChatGPT, and I said, create a new column and actually give me which industry each one of these sessions is going to be on. So I can basically, as the conference organizer, decide, okay, these are the ones that I want to use, right? So that right there saved me a ton of time. I mean, I would have been sitting there reading over and trying to assess which industries, and went ahead and spit back to me, a nice list of like, here's the industries and here's the ones. So I was able to now speed up my time with regards to selection. So if you have a lot of data that needs to be summarized in some type of way, or something that you find yourself doing that's monotonous, I highly encourage you to start experimenting.
So that's one of the things you had said in past events here, was things where there's repetition and you don't need a human, and there were a couple of other items, I think there were 3 or 4 that you mentioned. What are the 3 or 4, just backtracking a little bit to past events? Yeah. Like I say, it's we should be working collaboratively with artificial intelligence. So we should be finding things that it's good at that we're not good at, right? And so oftentimes reading over large documents, right, that it can be very tiresome and boring and actually not very good. So what's something that you don't want to do today that actually would be better done by a computer? And when I say AI, in a lot of ways, I'm just talking about a computer. I mean, let's forget about how it's working under the covers. Like, what would a computer actually be able to help you do? And what we're seeing now is, of course, these computers are getting smarter and smarter. And now they can summarize a whole bunch of text. So ways in which, if you have a certain process in your business where you have a bunch of, steps that are happening, where humans are doing work that they're not so good at, which can be meticulous, right? Computers are very, very good at meticulous work. Do you have something that has a clear start and an end goal, right? So for me, in that example that I had a very clear thing. I had a specific task that I wanted to have it do. I had a bunch of data, and I needed to basically make sure, okay, let's have a output that had the spreadsheet look like this, right? With this additional information. So those are 2 things, right? Things that humans aren't good at, and you have a specific task. And then the other thing, oftentimes, that I talk to companies on is,
where can you, and this might lead into another question we talk about, like how do you get your data practice in order? And so a lot of it is where do you have data that you could train these systems on, right? So using ChatGPT is beautiful in that it's so large, it's such a large language model. But oftentimes, companies want a very, very specific large language model. They want something to work specifically on their data, which I think is fascinating, and that's where I think a lot of these applications are going to go, where we're starting to train intelligence and intelligent neural networks on your data. And so if you have data that has clear inputs and clear outputs, you have things that humans don't want to do, those are prime candidates anywhere within your organization, whether it's finance or it's HR, for example, or it's sales. That's what I'm finding is anything that sort of covers those three types of buckets are things that companies want to use AI for.
So then that leads to the fear that many people have is, gee, does the AI take my job away? And so if AI and computers can do the job of people that don't even want to do that particular job or function, talk a little bit about ways that workers can learn skills that help them work alongside of AI and make them more productive and frankly probably satisfied workers.
Yeah, well, there is a big fear. And, I'll tell you from my own opinion, right? I used to write a lot of software, right? And I think the software engineering field is completely changing. The legal profession is completely changing, right? Marketing is completely changing. All these fields are completely changing because you were paid at one point for the knowledge you gained over time, right? And I jokingly was telling people before this is, people paid me a lot of money just to write code. And I would say just to write code, but I knew the specific syntax, I knew exactly how to do it, and I would get paid a lot for that. And I'm looking around saying, no one's paying me for that anymore, right? And so how can I use the tool to level up, right? To basically, I realize that someone just writing code is not going to be a viable job today or in the future. As I'm hiring people out of school, somebody that can just write code, computers more and more are going to be able to do that stuff, right? So what we all as workers, as knowledge workers in a lot of ways, we feel threatened. We feel threatened that because I've studied all this information now, I'm no longer going to be relevant. And one of the books that I was reading, the Nexus books, talks about this. It made me think. He said, people think that doctors are never going to be replaced by AI, and that nurses are going to be the first ones that are going to be replaced. And I said, interesting. This book goes on to basically talk about, actually, it's the nurse's job that's more safe. He or she is going to be the person that's going to be administering the shots. They're going to be the person sitting at the bedside. They're going to be the person that's going to be interacting with the person maybe in hospice, right? Those are the jobs that AI is not going to replace. They have a much greater chance of replacing the physician that's been learning all of this information, because all of that information now is basically in the large language model. It's been aggregated, and it can respond faster than any physician could, right? So are physicians going away? No. And I feel like are nurses going away? No. None of them are going away. I think what's happening or going to happen here is the role is going to change, right? The job of a physician to come out and read a bunch of medical literature and then sort of be the oracle that you go and you talk to, that is going to change. That's not going to be what a physician does, right? And so what I think we need to do is start thinking about, how can the physician use this tool collaboratively? How can somebody in marketing use this tool collaboratively to, again, help them be the best marketer that they possibly can? And I think it's going to be a shifting thing. And people are going to lose their job, but the people that are going to lose their jobs or things that are going to change are going to be the people that don't adapt. And so the biggest thing that I would say is you got to make sure that you are able to adapt. You got to make sure that you are being able to be as creative as possible and bringing in new techniques. I'm telling you, I've been writing code for 25 years, and I was just the staunch person that was like, no, this is the greatest thing. The way that I write it is the way I'm going to do it. And I have had to retrain my brain over the past year and realize that, wow, I'm actually better now because I have a co-pilot, right? I have this agent that I can speak to at any time, that I can ask questions night and day. There's a really interesting commercial that came out. It's by Google. Google Gemini came out just a couple weeks ago. But it's a fabulous commercial, and it really talks to this aspect of, being able to just ask it questions anytime, right? There's a person that's sitting there and the kids are running around the living room and he's basically saying, the kids are running around, what do I need to do? And another person's like trying to fix the car and it's like, the lug nut doesn't fix or doesn't come off, what should I do, right? And that's how I think we are going to be collaborating with this artificial intelligence, is we're going to have something that's going to be there that we can ask it anytime, any day. Will it come up with the answers that we want 100% of the time? Probably not. But hopefully it will actually allow us to expand and be more creative as we can take pieces of what it's going to be outputting. And I just don't see it replacing jobs 100%.
So if it's not going to replace a job 100%, but you are starting at a base like where we're at now, you have to make incremental progress, little bits at a time. What are some simple ways that companies can begin to experiment with AI?
Similar to the other question with regards to experimentation, I mean, a lot of it is figuring out what the challenge is and then doing research, right? I think something like a generative AI like ChatGPT or Claude or any of these other ones, Copilot. So this is the other thing that's interesting. You'll be seeing these just automatically being built into your tools, right? If anyone uses Microsoft 365, now you're starting to actually see that they have this thing called Copilot that's there. And you'll have a meeting with somebody, and all of a sudden you get the summarization of the notes of what was there. There's action items, there's to-dos that were done. I mean, I'm using tools like that today, and a lot of it is easy as like, yes, opt in. So I would say that as you start looking around and you have the opportunity to opt in for some of these tools, I encourage you to opt in. Now, obviously, there's a whole privacy side, and we can go down that whole rabbit hole too, as well. But large companies, Google, Microsoft, Amazon had their big reInvent thing this week. It's amazing. They're going to be spending so much money building out services. Alexa is going to change. The way that you used Alexa in the past is going to be completely changed. But these companies are starting to sort of build this in, which I think is fabulous, that there's just going to be starting to actually have these more conversations around you. And I think, again, just thinking about where would I go to Google today? I have a problem, right? Or a challenge, right? These are things that I want to work on. You should start thinking about, well, how could I bring ChatGPT to the table?
So if you're thinking about solving problems in new and exciting ways, what other exciting developments do you see coming as you look forward? Yeah, this is really cool. So 2025 is going to be fun. There are a couple things I'll try and think through, because I'm sure I'll miss them. There's a concept called Agentic AI, and you're going to hear more and more about this, but allowing us to basically set up AI agents. And the concept here is you sort of give your AI or your agent a specific task, and then it farms out and does all of the work of the pieces that needed to be done. And so right now it's very specific, right? I basically gave it a spreadsheet and I said, do this one thing, right? But we've all heard of the Turing test, right? Sort of the idea of the Turing test is, could a machine fool a human into understanding that it's really a machine that I'm having a conversation with versus a human, right? And I would argue that the Turing test has been conquered now. I think a lot of people are communicating with artificial intelligence and they couldn't tell if it's an AI or it's really a human. But the new version of the Turing test is fascinating. The idea would be is you would basically say, I want to start a business that generates $10,000 a month in revenue on Amazon. Go. Right? And so now you're going to start having an AI agent that will go out and start actually looking at, okay, what are the best industries that I should be focusing on? Okay, I think we're going to start selling widget X. Okay, where should I source these from? Right? What should my price be? The whole idea is that you give it a high-level goal, a high-level task, and now you can actually start having AIs spawn other AIs to start doing all of this work. And so that's Microsoft and Google. All these companies are working on that type of thing, where you'll be able to give it a specific end goal, and it will figure out how to make these tasks work. The other thing that you're seeing is basically this idea that, and you're seeing it with the newer versions of ChatGPT, is oftentimes it doesn't return the right result because it actually doesn't understand the nuances, right? The various steps that need to be happening in the question that you're asking for. And so ChatGPT released this thing called O1,
recently. It's still in preview, but you ask it to do a specific question, and then it goes through this thought process, and it actually catches the mistakes that it's making along the way. And the whole idea of that is how can we stop having it invent things, right? This idea of hallucinations. So this is a way that we're looking at trying to reduce hallucinations, trying to not actually have it return things that are completely false. Because mind you, like generative AI is actually just predicting what the next word should be. It's yes, facts have been built around how the neural network works, but it can very easily grab the wrong words and give the wrong response. So this whole idea of basically advanced thought process is something that's going to be huge in 2025. The other thing is longer history, more more understanding of you. And I think right now, if you're using an AI or ChatGPT, for example, you're doing a little thing, and then you're doing a little thing, and you're doing a little thing. You basically have these little history chat windows. Well, imagine if you actually had this with you all the time, and it's continuously learning, right? And that's what Microsoft is working on right now, is basically near infinite history. And so it opens up some interesting thoughts in my mind is, if I'm continually asking this thing over the course of 5, 10, 15, 20 years, this thing's going to know a lot about me. In fact, even if I pass away, you might actually have an agent that will sort of continue on, right? My kids might be able to ask, well, what would daddy do in this situation, right? So it's super interesting in that way. And I think then another thing is smaller and smaller language models. So right now, they're spending a lot of money, a lot of natural resources trying to build these huge models. And the challenge with that, in my mind, is I don't think that's the right approach, honestly. I think we can want to have smaller models that are very focused on us and very focused on our tasks. And those things will run on your phones. Those things will run on your desktops. They won't need to be internet connected. And they will be much more secure. They will be much more private and personal. And that, to me, seems super exciting as well.
You talked about these hallucinations. What about AI bias? Tell us a little bit more about that and what companies can do to mitigate that bias.
Well, first of all, you have to understand your data, right? You have to understand that your data inherently is biased in some shape or form. Whether you want to have it be or not, it definitely is. I was actually out at a medical device company this past week, and it was interesting. They shared with me that they were looking at cancer in pictures and deciding if the cancer was benign or not, right? And so whenever the cancer was benign, they actually had, just so happened that when they took the measurements, they put a ruler next to it to measure it, right? And what they learned over time was that this thing, when it saw a ruler, it said that the cancer was benign, right? So you need to make sure that the data that you have isn't being polluted, right? That's a prime example of where you have biased data. You have external things that are in the frame of view that the machine and the computer picked up on and completely made the model irrelevant, right? So yes, you need to make sure that what you're feeding these systems is kind of as wide as possible, right? And it takes some time. You probably don't even understand your own biases in some ways, right? Maybe this is the way that things have always been done, but a lot of it involves making sure that you can get a wide range of data. There's this other concept called synthetic data too. We're starting to use AIs to generate data. Which I actually think is an interesting situation. You might be in a place where you don't have enough data, so you could actually use AI to generate you an unbiased model or unbiased data sets. So I think one of the things that, again, to come back to the question is yes, things like this, you need to make sure that. And frankly, a lot of it is testing. Like, does this pass the sniff test, right? As I'm testing, am I getting back the results that I actually expect that it would? And this is where I think the human intuition comes in, right? This is where I think AI is still horribly bad. We talked about basically the jagged frontier of AI. You oftentimes will get things back where you're like, that's just not logical. Like, as a human, that is not exactly what I would expect it to do or what I want to have the artificial intelligence do. So just another reason as to why I feel like the human in the loop is still utterly important right now.
What about industry beliefs that are widely held or conventional wisdom would suggest that you disagree with? Anything that people are saying, hey, this is how the world is, and you're saying to yourself, no, that doesn't match up with what I think?
Well, I touched on one before, which is large language models, right? I believe that there's this whole idea of small language models that I think is actually a much, much better approach. And so while companies are spending billions and billions of dollars building these larger and larger these larger and larger networks, I don't believe that that is the right answer. So I'm probably going against a little bit on like the tide with that. I think the other thing is I think you see a lot of people saying that AI is the best solution to everything, right? I touched a little bit on that. It's not the best solution to everything. Because I just find a lot of companies wanting to basically throw a lot of money and effort at generative AI, which is not the best answer in a lot of these cases. And then, I think, what happens with these algorithms kind of goes back to your prior question, Rick, was really around, like biases, for example. And I think oftentimes companies are too eager to just sort of turn the keys over to letting the decisions being made by the system. And so we've seen situations where, for example, like Facebook or even YouTube, for example, they've given the artificial intelligence the directive of, let's have more user engagement, right? That's the directive of the artificial intelligence. Let's build bigger user engagement. And what has happened over time is now these systems start to make people be polarized. It'll only show videos to you, the ones that you want. It'll only show information to me, the ones that I have clicked on, or the ones that I want. And that's the fear, is the unintended consequences of, we have a certain set of, I think, beliefs, certain set of morals that I think us as a human race sort of believe in. And if you turn an AI loose, these things can ultimately say, but I'm feeding the objective of basically giving more user engagement on YouTube, right? Well, the problem is we're all watching bad videos, right? We're all watching videos that reinforce our own beliefs. And so what I'm concerned with, and one of these other things, is I think people kind of write that off, but I think that is a core challenge that we have right now, is handing the keys over too much to these algorithms.
Would that be the thing you're most fearful of, or anything else that, if you'd say, is even a bigger fear than that?
No, and that is kind of some of the crux of the book, the Nexus book, is really this idea that, we're going to start living in more and more of an isolated world, because the information that we're going to get fed is going to be more and more driven by not human values. It might be driven by commerce. It might be driven by a particular whatever leadership is in place, maybe in another country, right, that doesn't have a democratic society, for example. They can control these networks and can control the information. And yes, somebody could have done this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 1,000 years ago. What AI now is allowing us is to generate these networks and generate information so quickly, that it's beyond, human comprehension. I would say, the other fears is, like I said, there is definitely something around the human aspects of it, and that we rely on this too much. I was thinking about, did anyone watch the movie, I think it was called War Games? It's back in the 80s, right? Matthew Broderick, right? I think he was just a kid in high school, and he was basically hacked into the government's computer system. And I was thinking about this. I was like, we could have that thing, because what happens is that everyone within the military believed that there was actually a nuclear war that was going to happen, right? They were all inside what has been termed intersubjective reality. They were inside the reality that this is what's happening. And that's the fear, is that we rely too much upon the computers and the systems, and that's all we're looking at, and we're not actually stepping back, which is what happens in the movie, is they basically realize, it's a game that's happening, inside the computer, but the data they were getting was not right. There was no threat from Russia. There were no missiles that were lined up, but the computer system had fooled itself and had fooled everybody into believing that. So.
All right, let's turn it over. Any questions from our audience? Yeah, right here in front.
Yes. We've all heard the saying, you don't know where you're going, and you go to get you. And there's a lot of are made with AI if you don't write the appropriate prompt. So could you speak to prompt engineering and how that is important, the critical starting point?
The question, if you didn't hear it over here, is prompt engineering and asking the right question on the front end to get the right answer on the back end.
Yeah, if you haven't heard of prompt engineering, it's kind of a term that's been going around, that it's really allows you to set the large language model into the context that you want to have it behave in. And so, just to step back, these things are really just prediction machines. They're predicting the next word based on all the information that it's been taught and trained and learned from, not only off the internet, but also from humans. There's actually humans that are adjusting the weights inside the neural network. But at the end of the day, you need to give it the context that you want to have it live in. And if you just ask it a random question, like I was saying, hey, what's the size of the moon? It's going to go ahead and give you a specific answer because it's seen so much of that specific data. And those are really benign things to be asking, right? But if you're asking for a cancer diagnosis or cancer cure or something like that, you need to be very particular on what you're asking for, and essentially, I guess the bounds and the rules for which it should stay in, right? As it's predicting these words along the way. And so, is it critical for us? Absolutely. I mean, again, these things are relying upon probabilities, and the larger the probability that you can point it in the right direction of the answer that you want, or the persona that you want to actually have that person sit in, or the large language model. I mean, I oftentimes call it a person. I often feel like this is another person that's with me on my journey. Act as this specific person, or here's some information that maybe you didn't know about. That's the other problem that can happen, is these large language models don't have all the current up-to-date information. And if you don't provide it with that context, you have a greater chance of having a hallucination. You have a greater chance of it just randomly grabbing stuff, words, and basically putting them together and sounding very authoritative, right? It sounds like it really knows what it's talking about. And this is where, again, you can't just rely upon the outputs. So is that important? Yes, it is important. I think the one caveat that I would have, though, is with this advanced reasoning that's coming out with O1, I personally believe that a lot of the prompting over the course of time is going to need to be, it's not going to need to be as much as we had right now. Less and less, it's starting to figure out and then ask you questions back. So this is the other thing that I think is that maybe like people don't realize. You're always going to get an answer back. I mean, unless you shoot it down, generally you ask the large language model a question, you're going to get a response back. Very rarely will it say, "I don't know," right? And so with these advanced reasoning techniques, you're going to start to feel more and more like you're actually conversing with somebody. And if it doesn't feel like it has the right answer, it's going to come back to you and say, "Could you actually elaborate a little bit more? How would you like for me to respond to this? What type of do you have additional data for me? Here's an answer. Do you like it or not?" It's that type of back and forth that is not built into these large language models. And so I think personally, you talk about like, what do I think is going to be a little bit different? I just think that this idea of good prompt engineering is still hugely valuable, but over time I think it's going to diminish.
Other questions? Wendy.
Thank you very much for this topic. It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Rick. The question is, like, you were discussing how you're very proud of the code that you used to write. That was very much a part of you. So from the creative perspective, writing a script or a marketing campaign or anything, if I put an outline, very specific, have an interaction with AI, and I get an outline, and they spit out a script, who gets the credit?
Question, if you didn't hear it over here, is getting credit for creative activity, whether it's writing a script, doing marketing, writing a song, writing anything along those lines. Who gets the credit?
Yeah. Well, I thought I had read something recently. I don't know if there's any lawyers here, and because I think there's Jeff, maybe you know better than I do, but I had actually thought that, and back to this medical device company, because I was talking with them recently, and they're running into these same things. Like, we're having AI basically generate these ideas, and at the end of the day, from the legal standpoint, I think it needs to be assigned to a human. There needs to be a human that's actually behind the patent or the trademark or whatever it is. So, but you're thinking more, I think, philosophically, like like who gets the credit for doing it? I mean,
That's legal too. IP, it's legal.
Yeah. But I mean, but the other aspect is maybe even should I feel good about what I just did, right? And do I feel like I actually contributed because I just gave this thing a prompt and it came back to me with all of my answers? And so it can start to feel like, well, maybe I shouldn't take the credit for this, right? Maybe I actually didn't do a whole lot of work in this. And so, no, I think you did the work, you created the prompt. Hopefully you validated it, and if you didn't, then that's up to you, as well. But ultimately, if you generate something using AI and then you put it out in the world, ultimately, it's still back to you. I don't think people need to know that you used AI to generate it or not. You should utilize the tool for as much as you wanted to utilize the tool. I mean, I would think back if you decided to use a clay tablet and a chisel, and you decided to write a whole bunch of stuff that way, versus using a word processor, you should still just use the word processor and take advantage of it. Take advantage of the tool that's there.
I saw you next. The question was, if you didn't hear it, was about use cases in kind of bigger picture, broader applications, whether it's manufacturing. We were talking kind of about more micro productivity at the individual level. So if we go up a level or two from a more macro perspective, bigger industry problems, supply chain, manufacturing, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, AI is a blanket terminology. So are we using it in manufacturing? Absolutely. I mean, there are numerous companies that are using it to deal with potentially downtime, right? Predictive analytics before machines actually fail. How can we predict that they're going to fail before they're going to fail, right? I did a big project with a leather company, big leather company, that was using computer vision to take a look at cowhides and then grade them. And this was a human process. Humans would basically look at this and say, that's an A, B, or a C grade. And based on the leather, we're going to use it for the inside of a shoe or a nice, chair, right? And those are different types of leather grading that you needed. And so we used computer vision, which is one of these AI things. It's not generative AI, right? It's basically a neural network. It's a deep neural network. But yes, they're using it for quality assurance. There. I mentioned the banking industry, for example. That's been going on for a long time. We've been using large, machine learning, deep neural networks to understand that your credit card process should happen and be passed or not. Fleet management. I worked with a company that has a dash cam and basically taking pictures of distracted driving of drivers that are on the inside, and we're using computer vision to alert people that, okay, these are not safe drivers, for example. And then we're also obviously tracking these trucks where they are in the field for logistical operations. Okay, let's send the trucks over here instead, right? And all of that is all machine learning. That's all deep learning. Is it a ChatGPT type thing? Well, not yet, but it can be, right? And this is where I think it's fascinating, is somebody could just sit down or even open up their phone and then just start talking to it. Hey, where are my trucks today? And it's that aspect of this whole generative AI that I think is going to be super fascinating, is we don't need to go to a website anymore. We're not going to need to bring up a chart. We're just going to be able to just ask it stuff. And I'm not sure if the last time I was here, but I'm working with a company that they do large-scale signs, and they've been doing this for 20 years. And their CEO came to me and said, I want to use AI to allow me to be a better, to basically bid projects better, right? And I'm like, okay. And he's like, help me figure this out. And I'm like, well, do you have a spreadsheet that has all of your projects, all of the history, what materials you used to build them, where they were, what time of year they were? He's like, yep, I have a spreadsheet of all of that stuff. I'm like, let's feed it in to ChatGPT and see what happens. And so we did that. And he basically could start asking it questions. I have a project coming up using this material. It's this big. Tell me what I should bid it at, right? It rolled over all of that information and basically gave him a response back. Didn't need to hire some data scientist, so I'm out of a job, I guess, right? But no, it's the creative thinking like that. And in my standpoint, as I stepped back, I said, look, I made this CEO, I empowered him, or AI empowered him. I didn't do it. AI empowered him now to be able to run his business more efficiently by being able to to bid projects out based on data that he had, but had no capability of being able to assimilate it together, right? And so it's bringing us superhuman skills that we would no longer have, or that we wouldn't have.
Okay, he's going to stay afterwards, so if you have more questions, feel free to come up and talk to him after we finish. 3 more questions, lightning round, 30 seconds or less on your answer.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about the key concepts you're teaching your students at St. Thomas.
I think the main thing is to be adaptable, right? A lot of the students, they're using AI in a lot of ways to either submit papers that they write to me, to even write code, to think through their projects. I think that's all great. At the end of the day, they still need to get up and present. They still need to be able to explain what they did, and they still need to tell me why they chose one over the other. And I don't think that's ever going away. Education is going to be super. People are afraid of it, but I also think people are going to learn better, and they just need to be also just still need to, that whole explainability side, right? That's what I'm making sure that students are able to come out of there with.
What is one piece of advice that you would give our audience to do an AI initiative?
One piece of advice to do an AI initiative?
Yeah.
Boy. I think I would come back to take a look at where you have the least efficiency in your business. I find a lot of businesses are still dealing with spreadsheets. They're cutting and pasting, copying things, they're emailing stuff. Like, look for those things, because a lot of that stuff can be automated really quickly using AI.
Okay, lastly, what's the one thing you want the audience to take with them today, given our topic and what we covered?
Wow. I think the little picture that I had there on that, in fact, I would say take the piece of paper with you. I think you should understand that generative AI, it's different than all of these other AI systems that have been around for a long time. We've been advancing this over time. We're no longer near the end, right? Something else is going to come up next year that's going to be the most groundbreaking thing. But I think the one thing to take away, I think, is kind of what I said earlier: be adaptable, right? It's going to be the people that are going to blend. It's going to blend different backgrounds, different expertises together. Those are the people that are going to succeed and win in this new world.
All right, everybody, have a great holiday season. Merry Christmas. I hope to see you on January 9th when we talk about all things family business. Let's all give Justin a round of applause.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.